Hello jeweler, welcome to this module on wave management. Now I know that sounds a little bit weird, but don't worry, by the end of this it'll make perfect sense and why you want to be able to manage your waves and how it can dramatically improve your life. But first, in order to understand wave management, we need to understand cause and effect. Newton's third law states that for every action or force in nature, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If object A exerts a force on an object B also exerts a force or an equal and opposite force on object A. In other words, forces result from interactions. What this means is that if you push against something, it naturally has to push back against you with equal force. The easiest way to explain this is to think of a skateboard. Have you ever been on a non-moving skateboard before, or a surfboard or a longboard, and you've just tried to step forward off of it, or a boat? What happens? If you try to step forward, the board starts to push backwards, and all of a sudden, even though you are pushing forwards, the board is pushing back the other way, and instead of just being able to step off easily, you fall forward and hurt yourself. So why is that? The reason is because while you are exerting a force on this skateboard by moving forward, which is the action, the skateboard is reacting equally and oppositely to your action by moving backward, which is the reaction. If there's no friction at all, like if you're stepping off of a small boat or a stand-up paddleboard, then the equal and opposite reaction is very, very easy to see. Now, while this makes some hilarious home videos, it's also got some principles that go far beyond skateboards and surfboards. You see, that law of equal and opposite reactions isn't just true with physical objects, but also in our lives and with our personalities too. Have you ever learned what you need to do to hit your goals, and then you try really, really, really hard to hit those goals, but then all of a sudden there's a powerful drive to do nothing but smash your goals back down? For example, have you ever tried to go on a diet and you're good for 3 or 4 days, but then suddenly you get a craving and think, oh, it's just a bite, and all of a sudden you're eating worse than you were before, and then after a while you want to eat better and you get back on another diet? Or have you ever worked out really hard and you're super proud of yourself, and then you think, hey, I deserve to eat unhealthy, and all the progress that you just made is taken away in an instant? Then over time you get sick of looking or feeling the way you do, and you go back to trying to work out hard. And this is with literally everything that we do. You clean your home or apartment really, really clean, and it feels great for a few days, but then little by little you let it get dirtier and dirtier until you just can't stand looking at it anymore, and something kicks into gear and you begin cleaning like a maniac until you're finally happy again. But then slowly it begins to get out of hand and get dirty again. Or your bank account. Back when I lived in Berlin, I wouldn't make a lot of money at all. And normally, if my bank account got above $2,500, I would feel great. I would feel like I had all the money I could need, and I would go out and buy all the things I'd been thinking about. And I'd go out to eat, and I'd spend a little more at the grocery store. But then as soon as my account got below 1,000, all of a sudden, it was like alarms would start going off and I'd begin sweating and I couldn't sleep at night. I was just always freaking out and would scheme and do anything I could to get the account up higher. And then it would hit 2,500 and I'd feel great and go back to spending again and again and again until I'd hit 1,000. And it's like I was fighting for my life and trying to keep that number up. Have you ever been there? You'll find that with your bank account right now. You can probably think about it when it gets below a certain number, you're in gear. All of a sudden, you're going to kick in and regulate that thing back up. Then, over a certain number, you're probably going to spend it and break it back down. It was a fascinating thing to understand. If I was up here, I'd be cocky and spend it. That's when I was confident. If I was down here, I would panic and I'd save and I'd be trying to get sales and do whatever I possibly could. It wasn't just with money though. Like I said, this was with everything in my life. It was with the cleanliness of my apartment. At the peak was how clean I wanted it, and when everything was done, it was like when the bed was made, when bathrooms were clean, when it was vacuumed and mopped, everything. It was immaculate where I wanted it. it would get to this peak, and then I would have this trough and this low, which was as dirty as I could possibly stand it. That was a certain state where I just couldn't let it go any further. It was impossible for me to tolerate anything below a certain level of cleanliness. So if it would dip that low, I would kick in and start cleaning it. And if it went above that, it's like I would sabotage it, and I would start leaving plates and stuff around, and then I would just start making it dirty again, almost out of habit. The sum of these average two, the cleanliness and the dirtiness of my apartment, was the average state of my apartment. So if anyone came over to my house, it's pretty much the state that they would expect it would be in. The sum average between those 2 points. So what's happening? Well, what we're going to be talking about is called wave management. And the reason that being able to manage your waves is so important because of this little fact. Most people are afraid to face their true selves. The way we operate is a lot like a thermostat. The way a thermostat works is you set it to a certain temperature in your home or in your car. And when the temperature gets too hot, the thermostat kicks in and the air conditioning comes on and the temperature comes down. And if it gets too cold, the thermostat kicks in and it works to heat up your home or your car so that you can maintain a constant temperature. Well, inside of you is a thermostat as well. Like we talked about before, you have your old self and your becoming self. Now, if you want to improve it all, your old self is going to look at that as an attack. It's going to try to do everything it possibly can to bring you back down to where you were before. At the same time, if your life gets too out of hand and things are really out of control, your thermostat is going to kick in and tell you to get your life together immediately. All of a sudden, you'll start feeling like nothing else matters except getting your life together. In the same way that there are equal and opposite reactions in nature, our old self will react negatively whenever we try and move forward in life. So when I started noticing this happening and started to talk to others about it, it fascinated me because literally everything in my life followed this exact pattern of construction and destruction to the same points. And it was like spooky. What fascinated me is that not only would I have these in different parts of my life, but they were all in sync with one another. So it wasn't just that all these things had patterns, it was like they were tied together in a pattern. So if I was sleeping in and eating poorly, then my apartment was messy and my finances were down. And if I was bad in one area, then I was bad in all areas. If I was happy, in a sharp mental state, my apartment was clean and my finances were up. It's like when things were good in one area, they were good in every area. So when things were bad in one area, they were always bad. So these peaks and troughs, these highs and lows of everything in my life, it was like they were all tied together and all perfectly in sync with each other. It felt like my life was on a graph and that it was making a wave of ups and downs and peaks and troughs. It was like when one thing was going good, everything was going really well. And I was on top of life and I was just crushing it. Then when one thing was going bad, everything was going bad and it was just disaster. It was a fascinating thing to start to discover this in my life. And up until that point in my life, I had no understanding of myself that allowed me to look at myself from the outside and say, Robbie, I've noticed that you do this. Instead, I thought I existed at the mercy of some outer force and believed there was nothing I could do to influence my life in a big way. It was, oh, poor me. I was a victim to forces outside of my control and there was nothing I could do about it. That's at least what I thought. I just felt like I was just walking through life and life was hard. All this random stuff was always going on and something would pop up in my life and I'd be like, I've just got bad luck. These bad things just keep on happening and it was poor me and everyone else's fault. That's how I used to think. That's how a lot of people think. The finding of this pattern, after going through enough of these cycles and living through enough pain, I started to recognize this pattern in my own existence. Finding it proved to me that there was some underlying rules of the universe governing everything. The discovery was so spooky because it happened with my bank account and it was measurable with my bank statements. I could just literally look through my bank statements and I could recognize these patterns in the rest of my life. Then I could recognize it with my inbox and my emails. I would get built up to so many emails that were unread and messy, or I wouldn't reply to people for so many days, or I wouldn't return calls or text messages for so many days. And then all of a sudden I just fix it all up. I would always oscillate between these booms and busts, and it happened with my mental state. It happened with the cleanliness of my refrigerator. It happened with my workout routine. It happened with my relationships. It happened with my habits, like every habit I had. It happened with everything. And it was a pretty remarkable thing to discover, and it showed me that if all of these things were tied together and interrelated, and if they were all symmetrical, and if they all followed a similar pattern like this, then there must be some underlying rules that were governing everything about me that I just didn't understand. Now, just because I discovered that these patterns existed and that they were with each other and moved with each other didn't mean that I was now totally free from their grasp. I recognized them, but they still seemed to have a hold of me. What I didn't understand was what people call managing your downside or downside protection. So, in investing, there's something called downside protection, which basically means that you have processes in place or programs in place so that you never lose too much money all at once. So, let's say that I invest $10,000 and my downside is $8,000, for example. What this means is that I will have processes in place, such as an order to sell my shares of a certain stock if my money gets too close to $8,000. It's an automatic reaction that's in place in order to minimize risk and keep from losing too much. Now, take this principle into your own life and recognize that we do this in life with our internal thermostat, and we manage our downside. We all have an automatic process in place that kicks in the minute we hit a certain point. When we do, all of a sudden the heat kicks on and we're more productive than ever before. You have a downside right now, and you can probably think of what it is in your bank account. So whatever that number is, we'll call that your panic number. Everybody has a panic number, an amount of money that when they see it, they freak out and they start kicking into overdrive and become an absolute success-driven machine. And everyone's number is different. Everyone's standards are different, and everyone's downside is different. But we also have an upside. We all have that place where we feel confident and cocky and where we stop being productive because we feel like we can take it easy and coast for a bit. Now, knowing this is not good enough, but it is the right place to start. Remember back in the beginning when I said that most people are afraid to face their true selves? Well, that's exactly how I was. In fact, I was even afraid most of the time to just check my bank account. I thought, hey, if I don't check it, then I won't feel the need to or urge to live wisely and get my life in order. I would literally live in denial of where I actually was because I was too afraid to face my true self. I wanted to live in a fantasy and believe that everything was okay, even though deep down inside I knew it probably wasn't, and I had this burning desire to be a bigger person than I currently was. The first step in overcoming this constant boom and bust cycle is to face your true self. This is uncomfortable, but only by discovering where you are and understanding what your downside is can you start to improve your life in any measurable way. So let's imagine that you are where I was and that your downside is $1,000. So I've created a little wave graph to help you understand how this works because it's so important for you to be aware of your own pattern of existence. So look yourself in the mirror and to know where you should go from here. And it looks like a wave graph with a peak and a trough. And in the middle is the average of the two. The average helps you to see your current average situation. So the reason that we return to this average is because of a law called regression to the mean. So regression to the mean simply states that you might have an extreme event every now and then, and when you look at everything as a whole, though, there's an average that exists. And if you're extreme one day, then the chances are you won't be that extreme the next day. So we all have an average because of regression to the mean. No matter how wildly we succeed or fail, if our average is consistent, there will always be this tendency for us to naturally perform the same as we did before. This is true in your sales, in your golf game, in your driving, in how you eat and how you work out, everything. This is also why it's so important that we don't focus 100% on tactics, but on the person behind the tactics. You can learn all the tactics in the world, but because of regression to the mean, you'll likely not use them. You'll just stay the same person if you don't change. You might try them for a little bit, but then go back to doing what you were doing before because that's what you're used to. Cause will naturally lead to effect, and you can't get around needing to understand the cause and effect in your own personal life. Most people try to cheat cause and effect. They behave like it doesn't apply to them. And that's what I did. I would spend money on some stupid stuff, and then I would somehow think that I wasn't going to end up with no money and feeling not good again. So how does that work? You can't do an action and then not expect to get the outcome of that action. It doesn't work like that. When I was in a sharp mental state and had a clear mind and everything, and I was happy and confident, I would go out and hang out with my friends and put off work and would eat like crap. And I knew that the next day, or next week, I was going to regret it and feel like junk and have a foggy mind again. But I just did it anyway and just thought, oh, maybe it won't happen. I was in denial. So this is what I've noticed. Most people try to cheat cause and effect. They wonder why they're not wealthy, and they wonder why life isn't going their way. They blame other people, or they think it's all out of their control, but really they're just living an effect of a cause, and the cause was all the actions that they've taken. The only way to get successful is to deserve it. If we want to make money, we've got to do something to add value. If you can add value, you're going to make money. You can only produce value, though, by being productive, and that's when you're healthy and alert. So number 2 here that we're going to talk about is the mirror. And this is very similar to, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, except with the mirror, we understand it in a slightly different way. So how the mirror works is your fears and judgments are only an outward reflection of how you think and behave. So this was another really interesting one for me to discover. It was that because even though I didn't think I was always very judgmental. Even though I lived a life of helping people and volunteering all the time, I would judge people in my heart who made a lot of money, like even my best friend, even though there was nothing inherently wrong with him. It turned out that the problem wasn't actually with him, though, it was with me. I didn't think that it was judgmental if you just have judgments in your mind. I always judge other people. I'd think, that guy is such a show-off, or geez, what an arrogant guy, or wow, that guy, he's so cocky, or he's so full of himself. And I thought that I could get away with it because I wasn't saying it, and it wouldn't do any damage to me. And I thought that probably other people wouldn't judge me. What happened is, when I started my business, I was too afraid to do anything. I was too afraid to get on the phone and to call people. I was too afraid to show off in front of anybody. I was too afraid to send someone an email. I was too afraid to get out there and do anything. I was literally just paralyzed. That's when I really just got stuck. I would be judgmental of other people, but then I couldn't take action because I was afraid that others were going to judge me for taking action. It's pretty silly, really, because if you judge other people, you will not be able to do anything special due to your fear of being judged. This is the way it works. If you judge other people, that means that you're now going to be too afraid to do anything special. You're never going to be able to step outside of your comfort zone because you're going to have a massive fear that others are going to judge you. If you judge people who are on Instagram all the time, or people who make videos of themselves, or people who live in nice houses, or drive fancy cars, or show off their muscles, or anything, you'll always be afraid to achieve those things because you'll fear being judged yourself. So it's a really fascinating thing to discover in life because you understand that if anyone ever judged or judges someone, and you understand this, you know exactly the problem that they have themselves. So it's really interesting to read like Facebook comments and arguments and everything, because when people get offended and they start arguing and labeling other people and attacking other people, it's like, whoa, what they don't understand is that these people are just revealing all of the things that they're trying to hide. It's like people are just openly revealing their cards because they're judging others right in front of others, and so they're saying like, hey, I'm too afraid to do such and such. They're showing you their hand, what cards they're holding, but they don't think that they're doing it like that at all. It's so weird to watch because this is what I would always do. I'd always judge other people, but then that was always the thing that I was too afraid to do myself and really wanted to do deep down myself, though. It works like a mirror. The only way to be free of fear, the only way to be free of the fear of judgment is to not judge other people. And it was a really fascinating thing to discover because I was like, wow, all right, I'm just not going to judge anyone. From that point on, I didn't hold opinions of anyone. I would just see people, and people that I normally would have judged big time, I would just, like their Facebook posts, or I would no longer hold people in any form of judgment. And people who I used to think of as my enemy or anything like that, I decided to just be their friend and let go of it. And it was incredible what happened. All of a sudden, every ounce of fear I ever had about being judged just disappeared. I could then actually just do whatever I wanted to without any fear of rejection or fear of judgment at all. It all just fell off of me. It eroded from me. And the same thing will happen to you too. And this is a really, really, really big one. I notice a lot of people are too afraid to do something bold. They're too afraid to get on the phone. They're too afraid to do anything because of the fear of what other people would say about them. Well, if someone's too scared to do something because of what others will say, I know immediately what that person is saying about other people who are trying to do something big, which is such an amazing thing to understand because it's like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If someone's too afraid to step out of their comfort zone, then that means that they're judging people who are stepping out of their comfort zones. The only way to be free of that fear so that you can actually step outside of your comfort zone is to stop judging people who do that. It's as simple as that. It will totally change everything for you. From this point on, you do not want to judge anyone. And you want to let go of all those feelings and labels that you've given to people. Then you'll be totally invincible and able to do anything you need to without fear. For me, I knew deep down that it would be great to own a great house and to be one of those guys who has a course teaching people how to make more money and spend less time working. Yet at the same time, I would cringe whenever I saw someone like that. Because of that, I was never able to take a step forward and make a bold move. Then I decided to think instead, you know what? He or she probably knows something that I don't, and he or she must be doing something right because his or her life looks like the life that I want. And all of a sudden, these people didn't feel like my enemy anymore. They felt like people I wanted to learn from. For a lot of jewelers, this is a big one. They judge other jewelry stores for any number of reasons. That jewelry store is very out front with their beliefs. That business uses people who look like this with their marketing. That store sells lab-created diamonds. That business charges so much for a watch battery. That business does this or that, whatever. You can fill in the blank with whatever comes to your mind, right? The problem is that by saying those things, you're mirroring back to yourself the things that you are too afraid to do yourself because you might be judged for it, even if it's a good business move. Mirroring works this way too. If you don't invest in yourself, others won't invest in you. So this was another huge understanding. It was like if you don't invest your money in your education and in improving yourself, then no one is going to invest any money in you as a jeweler or as a businessman or as a business owner. It was fascinating to understand this because I noticed that all the people who were too cheap or too petty to ever sign up to do marketing with me or to allow me to create their websites or to invest in their education with a coach or ever buy any self-improving thing, they were always the people that would struggle in business and no one would ever buy anything from them either. So what was fascinating was I started to recognize this pattern in my own life too, where the prices that I was confident charging other people pretty much was a mirror reflection of the price I was confident investing in myself. So at the point where I had invested about $1,000 into my first online course, I was confident that I could now charge other people $1,000 to make the transformation happen for them. And then when I was investing $2,000 to $3,000 in courses, I was happy to charge my clients $2,000 to $3,000. And at the point where I was investing more than $20,000 a year in masterminds, I was confident charging people the same or similar amounts for my services and getting them better results as a result of doing better work for them. I really started to recognize this pattern. The prices that you're confident charging others are really just a mirror reflection of the prices that you are comfortable investing in yourself. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So this is how the mirror works. If you actively invest $2,000 in yourself, well, you're probably going to be able to get other people to actively invest $2,000 in you. Very, very simple observation. And it's fascinating to watch because the people who often can't get anyone to invest in them have never invested in themselves either. People who are stingy and have only ever invested $29 in an ebook or just want a free website, well, all they sell is little charms and all they ever charge is $29. The people who sell $29 ebooks and that's all they sell, you can pretty much always guarantee that all they've ever bought is $29, a $29 ebook. It's just a mirrored image and it's really fascinating to understand. So number one, congratulations on investing in this program. Just doing that alone is a huge, huge step because you're proving to yourself that people do buy stuff, and that people do spend money on the stuff that you think is important. And once that's proven to you, well, you're going to have no problem going out and trying to do it and trying to get others to do it to spend that kind of money on you. Another mirror is if you like to think about when making a buying decision, others will do the exact to you. So when I used to buy anything, I wanted to know everything about it. And I wanted to think about it all the time. It didn't matter what I was buying. If I wanted to go buy a gym membership, I would sit down with the person, I'd walk around the gym, and it's perfect. Like, I love the gym. I pretty much knew I wanted it, but I can't make the decision right now. No way. The person would say, hey, do you want to sign up? I'd be like, no. Do you have like a brochure or something that I can take away and so I can think about it? And in the jewelry industry, these people are called tire kickers. And I always loved kicking a good tire. And what I did is then I would take something away and I would just mull it over in this decision for like ages. And I just wanted to keep thinking about it. And that's the way I thought things were done. I think I inherited this belief or way of doing things from my belief that you should always seek a lot of advice before making decisions. I always had to know that other people thought my decision was really good, and I'd end up getting 20 different answers and could never just do anything to please anybody. So I was always paralyzed because everyone had different opinions. Well, if this is how you treat making decisions, what you'll find is that the people you do business with will also want to mull things over and kick tires as well. You'll say, so, we can design the perfect ring for you. Would you like to make your first down payment? And they'll reply, can I have a brochure? And how frustrating is that? If that's what's happening to you, check and see if you are doing the same thing. You see, we all have patterns of existence, and they ebb and flow like a wave. And when one thing is good, then everything flows upward. And when one thing is bad, then everything starts to flow downward until you hit your downside and kick back into gear and get back into success-eating mode. And the average of these 2 points is what we call your current situation. So the best way for you to increase that current situation is to get a good, hard, honest look at your downside. Figure out exactly where you are and stop being in denial about it. And you might say, well, that just sounds like bad news. What if I don't like what I see? Trust me, you probably won't. You're doing it right. The cool thing is that you're not stuck with any of this stuff. I think this is the mistake that a lot of people make. They think that once they identify the pattern and the tempo and the cause and effect, they think that that's them and they're stuck like that forever. But that's not true at all. You can totally change everything. You can turn it upside down. I used to have zero commitment. I couldn't even work for half an hour a day. I couldn't even work for half an hour a day. Well, I turned that into too much commitment. I turned it into the point where I could work for 12 hours a day for months on end without taking a break. I turned it totally on its head. It doesn't matter what it is. You can change anything. This mindset stuff is going to show you how you can totally rewire your entire brain and totally change your entire existence. It doesn't matter what we find here. When we're looking for problems and everything, don't feel bad about them. That's not what I'm trying to get you to do here. We're just trying to become aware of them so that we can fix them and change things, because if you're someone who is unhappy with the way things are right now, then you need to change things, because if you just keep going the way you've always been doing it, then you're always going to get more of what you've got right now. So the reason it's so important to be vividly aware of these downsides, to truly face ourselves, is because we become our lowest standards, not our highest dreams. So if we remember this peak and trough wave here, we rarely become the person we dream about. We've all got visions of who we want to be like and the highest version of ourselves, but we rarely ever become that person. We don't become the person that we dream about, because really life is way more about managing the downside than the upside. And no one's really talking about this at the moment. Everyone is out there just talking about positive stuff like, oh, you're great, just be happy and positive thinking and all of this. And everyone is always talking about it's all about happiness and peace and it's all about the light and all that stuff. And they totally ignore someone's dark side, the side which everyone sweeps under the rug. They just let it go. I've learned that life is way more about managing your downside than about managing your upside, because the downside is the dangerous side. And the jewelers that I've worked with who get this are the ones who see massive, gigantic improvements in their lives in very short periods of time. Once people get stuck in the downs, and they're stuck there for longer than they are in the ups. So often the downs are a lot stronger and more potent than the ups. And it doesn't matter who it is. I've seen people who make good amounts of money, but then they end up with nothing, because life and business isn't about how much you make. It's about how much you keep. It's about the average between these two, not the height of the peak. So I noticed a lot of people are amazing at doing Facebook ads, or they're amazing salespeople, or they're amazing at clienteling, or all sorts of stuff, and they even make good amounts of money, but they end up with nothing. They're constantly stressed out. There's not much point in making a lot of money if you don't end up having any money and you're always stressed out about money. I would rather be someone that made $1 million and kept $1 million than someone who made 100 million and then kept zero, because it's not about how much you make. It's about how much you keep. And you have to remember that. And the amount you keep is determined not by your upside, but by how low your downside is. So this is a quote from a book, and I cannot remember which book it is, but it is, "We are not the highest version of ourselves which we can imagine. We are the lowest version of ourselves which we can accept." So you need to understand that you will do nothing to achieve your dreams, but you will fight like hell to not breach your standards. So as humans, we do way more to not lose something than we will to gain it. And there have been lots of interesting psychological studies about this, and it's a phenomenon called loss aversion. It turns out that, contrary to what most people think, people are more motivated by loss than gain. So I'll give you an extreme example. If you were to give a jeweler a Ferrari and then say, okay, well, you need to make 10 grand a month in sales and you can buy, and then you can keep the Ferrari. But if you go below 10 grand a month in sales, I'm going to take the Ferrari away from you. Well, that jeweler is going to dance. That jewelry sales rep is most likely never going to let that thing go, because now he's got it and he doesn't want it to be gone. He's going to be super motivated, and he'll probably sell above 10 grand a month for the rest of his life. However, that's when you motivate someone by loss. If you motivate someone by potential gain, they often won't do anything. So if that jeweler was making $0 and you said to him, hey, see this Ferrari? I'll give you one once you start consistently making $10,000 a month. He's not very likely to achieve that. I mean, it's possible for sure, but one of them is infinitely more powerful than the other. The motivation to not lose something you already have is way more powerful than the motivation to gain something you don't have yet. So that's why we become not the highest version that we can imagine being, but we become the lowest version that we can accept living as. It's like everyone has these standards. People do not breach their low standards. People will never, ever, ever breach these standards. It's like a big thing that just never happens. So here's the secret. The same is true about your dreams. If you want to achieve your dreams and goals, you must turn them into irrefutable standards. You must make them a part of your future, which is without question something that you cannot lose. It's one thing to say, I'd like to buy a house in Hawaii someday, but it's another thing entirely to say, that house in Hawaii is mine, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure no one can take it away from me. Which mindset is going to get you to your goals faster? So, when we talked in our last video about the need for a hero, and that your hero needs to be you 1 year or 5 years or 10 years down the road, that immediately gives you control over your steering wheel. All of a sudden, the future you want is determined by the choices that you make and the steps that you take to get there. However, if you just approach it like it would be a nice dream someday if it happened, like most people do, then you're no longer in control. You're leaving your dreams and hopes up to chance. And if you're not in control, then who is? A great saying that has always stuck with me since the day I first heard it is, if you don't make a plan for your life, then somebody else will. If you're not willing to step out of your comfort zone and fight for what you want and what you personally believe in, then someone else with a stronger mind or more motivation will put you to work for their cause. They'll hire you and you'll make them rich. If you don't make a plan for your life, then someone else will. In regression to the mean, we understand that we will naturally return to the person that we were before, regardless of extremely good or negative events. This is why we need to first work on changing your mind, which controls your entire life, so that the mean or average of your being is fundamentally changed, and the person that you return to is always increasingly more and more like the hero that you want to become. So I provided for you a waveform that you can use to map out your current situation so that you can take a look at it and be honest with where you currently are. And by being honest with yourself, facing your true self, you can begin to manage your downside and create an irrefutable future for yourself. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.